This video is a foundational must-watch video for understanding God's big picture of prophetic end times signs. The information is also very interesting and extremely important. This will sound very strange, but the Great American Solar Eclipse in 2017 that peaked in the middle of the country at 1:17 p.m. beginning in St. Louis, Missouri, is a prophetic sign from God that is revealing that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis, Missouri on December 24th at the end of a trail of prophetic signs that began on the date 10/17, in which the trail of prophetic signs went through the date 11/7, which hints at 1:17 p.m. The date 10/17 hints at the eclipse that peaked over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. And the prophetic signs that occurred on the dates 10/17 and 11/7 revealed that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on December 24th in St. Louis, where the eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. The prophetic signs that occurred on 10/17 pointed to Zechariah 1:17 in the Bible. And to learn more about why God pointed to Zechariah 1:17 on the date 10/17, watch the must-watch Gaza explosion video. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. As can be seen in this email, the prediction that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash has been known since at least August 5th, 2021. The reason why the eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. is because the middle chapter of the Bible is the 117th chapter of the book of Psalms. This chapter also happens to be the shortest chapter in the Bible, and God uses records for signs. The number 117 is symbolic of the middle. The 2017 solar eclipse peaked in the middle of the nation at 1:17 p.m., which hints at the number 117. The 2024 eclipse will also traverse over the middle of the country, and its path of totality will cross over the path of the 2017 eclipse, precisely where it peaked. And the 2017 eclipse peaked in the middle of the path of totality of the eclipse. The 2017 eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. in the middle of the country. This is why the Roman Empire peaked in 117 AD. The geography of the Roman Empire reached its maximum expansion in 117 AD, and this hints at the eclipse that peaked at 1:17 p.m. in the middle of the geography of America. The eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. over the middle of the nation, and this hints at the middle of the Bible, which is the 117th chapter of the book of Psalms. More precisely, rather than saying that it is symbolic of the middle, 117 is symbolic of division. Jesus said, "Do not think that I have come to unite, to unify, but instead I have come to divide." The bigger plan for this world and this life, God's plan, is division. This is a fundamental principle. God is in the process of dividing the sheep from the goats, which was a metaphor that was understood in his time, this agrarian metaphor, because sheep follow the shepherd and goats are difficult to herd. They go off on their own. And the shepherd is, of course, Lord Jesus Christ. And so God is in the process of dividing, separating. You could call this separating. This is why the eclipse that went over the country divided the country. It's symbolic of this separation. This is why Jesus was resurrected on the 17th day of the first month, which hints at 117. Jesus and his resurrection is the first fruits of this division between those who will be saved and those who will not. And so this is scratching the surface of the symbolic meaning of the number 117 and how it symbolizes division. Now I'm going to start explaining how the mark of the Antichrist serves this function of separating people. This is also why the peak of the Roman Empire was in 117 AD. It represented a division between its expansion phase and its decline phase. The symbolism here also is the connection between Rome and the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist. But this is also why the middle chapter is Psalm 117. It in fact divides the Bible. This is also why the peak of the Roman Empire was in 117 AD. It represented a division between its expansion phase and its decline phase. The symbolism here also is the connection between Rome and the Antichrist and the mark of the Antichrist. But this is also why the middle chapter is Psalm 117. It in fact divides the Bible. Also, the phrase, "let it divide," which appears in Genesis chapter 1, verse 17. Also, the phrase, "let it divide," which appears in the first chapter of Genesis when the waters are divided in verse 17. "Let it divide" in Hebrew is equal to 117 because Hebrew letters are also numbers. It's called Hebrew gematria, and "let it divide" equals 117. One thing to add here too is that this is fundamentally the root of the philosophic reason for why collectivism, socialism, left politics is evil. It is against God's principle of division and separation. This is the foundational principle. The word holy in Hebrew means separate from. Our holy God is looking for and seeking a holy people, a separate, peculiar people that are set apart from the other people. And collectivism is evil. It leads to evil. It inevitably leads to trampling the rights of the individual. And it is against God's plan, which is why the enemy, the spiritual evil, Satan, uses left politics and collectivism. This is behind the impetus for the mark of the Antichrist. This public begins with an H, ends with an elf. This public begins with an H, ends with an elf drive to take the mark of the Antichrist. The thing is collectivism. You need to be doing it for the greater good. Collectivism. It is evil. Satan is using this and the people that follow this for his purposes. Collectivism and this coming together for the greater good is illustrated in the story of the Tower of Babel in the Bible and how it is against God. The paths of the two eclipses that cross over each other in the middle of the country will engender an X over America. In Paleo Hebrew, the Tav letter was an X. The inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, and it would have been a Tav mark. The X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. An X is two lines that cross each other in the middle of each line. The paths of totality of the two eclipses will cross each other in the middle of their paths, and they will cross each other where the first one in 2017 peaked at 1:17 p.m. And again, this is because the middle chapter of the Bible is the 117th chapter of the book of Psalms. The middle chapter of the Bible, the 117th chapter of the book of Psalms, symbolizes the Bible. The eclipse peaked in the middle of the country at 1:17 p.m. in order to hint at the number 117 and to point to the Bible. This middle symbolism contained in the middle of an X is why the first thing, and you know what I'm talking about, the thing that you can't talk about, was administered on the exact middle date in between the dates of the two eclipses, which was December 14th, 2020, the 48th anniversary of the last American to depart from the moon in the Apollo 17 mission, which symbolized America's departure from Christ, as the moon symbolizes Christ, and the Antichrist is the 48th president, and the 2024 solar eclipse, which involves the moon, will occur on the date 4/8, which hints at 48. December 14th, 2020 was also the date that the Electoral College voted, and the cowardly quote-unquote Christian 48th U.S. Vice President later did not take the appropriate action regarding the electoral votes. The number 50 symbolizes the church, as the church age began on the 50th day after Jesus' resurrection. The 48th Vice President, Mike Pence, was the 50th governor of Indiana, in the capital city of Indiana, Indianapolis. The path of totality of the 2024 eclipse that will engender an X, that is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, which will be used to persecute the church, will pass directly over Indianapolis, and this will point to the cowardly Christian Mike Pence, the 50th governor of Indiana. The name Pence is British English for the word that is the plural for pennies. This is because the mark of the Antichrist will be enforced through programmable digital currency that will be programmed to restrict the dissenters who refuse to take the mark of the Antichrist, the thing, from buying or selling food, as Bible prophecy explains. The 50th governor of Indiana, the 48th Vice President Mike Pence, and the path of the eclipse that will pass over Indianapolis, Indiana, hints at the acting Vice President, Kamala Harris, who is of Indian descent, who is predicted to die in a plane crash in the middle of the country, which will lead to the rise of the 48th president, the Antichrist. The mark of the Antichrist is designed to test the faith of quote-unquote Christians. The middle date in between the eclipses is symbolic of the middle of the X, that the paths of the eclipses will engender in the middle of the country. And because an X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, the fact that the symbolic first thing was administered on the middle date is confirmation that the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. Furthermore, an X is symbolic of a pair of chromosomes, and chromosomes are altered by the thing, which is one reason why it is a spiritual abomination and the mark of the Antichrist. The X over America that will be engendered by the paths of the eclipses over the middle of the country is symbolic of chromosomes that are altered by the thing, which was first administered on the middle date of the eclipses. Ancient Rome is symbolic of the Antichrist system, and the geography of the empire peaked in 117 AD. The Emperor of Rome is symbolic of the Antichrist king. The 2017 eclipse peaked over the middle of the geography of the country at 1:17 p.m. and lasted for exactly 4 times 40 seconds, which identified the 44th president as the Antichrist king. This is why Hank Aaron, player number 44 for Atlanta, the home run king, publicly took the thing in Atlanta, the home of the CDC, on the first day of the 117th Congress. The 117th Congress, for the first time ever, was ceremonially opened with a prayer to a pagan god instead of the God of the Bible, a book in which the middle chapter is the 117th chapter of the Book of Psalms. Atlanta is named after the mythical, technologically advanced Atlantis civilization, and this is symbolism for transhumanism. The things are transhumanism technology, and this is why the CDC, the quasi-military organization that pushed the things, is symbolically headquartered in Atlanta, and why it is that the home run king, player number 44, publicly took the thing in Atlanta. In the book of Revelation, the number of the Antichrist is 666, and the home run king for Atlanta, player number 44, died 6 plus 6 plus 6 days after he took the thing. Mass shootings are symbolic of the thing that are SHOTs that kill masses of people. Player number 44 died exactly 444 weeks after the Dark Knight Rises Batman movie massacre in Denver, Colorado. Denver, Colorado is the highest major city in America, and Colorado is the 38th state to join the Union. Bama is the Hebrew proper name for a place in Israel that means high place. Obama, which hints at Bama, held his Democratic National Convention presidential nomination acceptance speech in Denver, Colorado. Like the 38th president, which is hinted at with the 38th state, Gerald Ford, who was never elected vice president or president, likewise Obama will become the president again through being appointed instead of elected. In the Bible, the number 42 appears in context of instances of slaughter, and in the book of Revelation, the Antichrist is said to rule for a symbolic period of 42 months. The Dark Knight Rises movie massacre was exactly 42 months after the rise of the Dark Knight president with his first presidential inauguration. A biblical month is 30 days, and in Bible prophecy, the period of the Antichrist of 42 months is the equivalent of 1,260 days. Obama's inauguration was in turn exactly 1,260 years after the deadliest earthquake in Israel's history that killed tens of thousands of people. The number 117 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, and it is symbolized by the SHOTs in mass shootings. Obama's inauguration was exactly 117 months after the Columbine High School mass shooting in Denver, Colorado. The Columbine mass shooting symbolically began the trend of mass shootings in schools. This mass shooting was perpetrated by two boys whose names were Klebold and Harris, which hinted at Kay Harris, Kamala Harris. In fact, the first name of Klebold was Dylan, which hints at Kamala Harris's middle name, Devi. Dylan Klebold gives us K.D. Harris. And this is why the Columbine mass shooting was exactly 12,600 days after the birth of Kamala Harris. 12,600 days hints at the symbolic 1,260 days period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This 12,600 days is also exactly 600 plus 600 plus 600 weeks, which hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist. This 600 plus 600 plus 600 weeks is also exactly 414 months, which hints at 4 times 1 and 4, and therefore the 44th president. From the birth of Kamala Harris to the inauguration of Barack Obama, it is 414 months and then 117 months for a total of 531 months. It is 531 days in between the first and last blood moon lunar eclipse in a prophetic blood moon lunar eclipse tetrad. The intervals between the blood moon lunar eclipses is 3 sets of 177 days, and although it can't be explained here, the number 177 also hints at the number 117. 177 days is in turn 3 sets of 59 days, and Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash 3 days before her 59th birthday. Her predicted death on the date 10/17 will also hint at the number 117. It is through the replacement of Kamala Harris, after her predicted death in a plane crash, that Obama will be appointed the president again. Her death in a plane crash is predicted to be on the date October 17th, 10/17, which hints at the number 117, hence the 117 months connection in this trail of signs from her birth to the inauguration of Barack Obama. Obama's inauguration on the first day of his presidency, which was exactly 117 months after the Columbine shooting, on January 20th, 2009, was also exactly 117% of a year before he signed his nationalized health care, the thing his presidency is most known for. In other words, the symbolic beginning of Obama's presidency connects with the number 117 to the thing that symbolizes his presidency. 117% of a year is exactly 61 weeks, and the Antichrist was born in 1961, and the number 61 is the 18th prime number, and 18 equals 6 plus 6 plus 6, which hints at the number of the Antichrist. The number 117 hints at the mark of the Antichrist, which is why the Antichrist's inauguration was exactly 117 months after the SHOTs in the mass shooting, and was exactly 117% of a year before his nationalized health care, and it is him and his socialist ilk that will enforce the mark of the Antichrist through collectivist health care. The Antichrist king is the 44th president, and the home run king, player number 44, died 6 plus 6 plus 6 days after he took the thing on the symbolic first day of the 117th Congress. Hank Aaron played for the Braves in Milwaukee and Atlanta, and he also played for the Milwaukee Brewers. Milwaukee and Atlanta were the only cities that Hank Aaron played professional baseball for. And the day that Aaron took the mark of the Antichrist on the first day of the 117th Congress was 117 days after the Milwaukee and Atlanta baseball teams scored 19 and 29 runs respectively in their games on the date 9/9, September 9th in 2020. If you are not familiar with baseball, 19 runs and 29 runs are an extraordinary amount of runs to score in a game. The number 9 symbolizes God's judgment, and Atlanta's 29 runs were the second most runs scored in a game since the year 1900. In a game in 2007, 30 runs were scored by the baseball team from Dallas, the city in God's prophetic signs that symbolizes the American Evangelical Church. There was one player that coincidentally played in both record-scoring games. Nick Markakis, player number 22. The name Mark Kakis hints at the mark of the Antichrist, which is symbolized by the number 22, as the Tav letter, an X in Paleo-Hebrew, is the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. In the book of Revelation, a period of 1,260 days is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist. God uses records in his signs, and Nick Markakis held the record for most games in a row by an outfielder in which he did not commit an error. It was 398 games in a row that he did not commit an error, and the number 398 is the 126th semi-prime number. A semi-prime number is a number that is only divisible by two prime numbers, and the number 126 hints at the symbolic 1,260 days of the Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. This prophetic sign involving Nick Markakis and his streak without committing an error is because errors symbolize sin, for which we are all guilty of and require God's forgiveness. The city of Athens, Greece, symbolizes democracy. The end of Nick Markakis' career in the autumn of 2020 was at the same time as the end of democracy in America, which is leading to the return of the Antichrist, who will officially end the Constitution. Nick Markakis' last game of his career was played on the date 9/27 in 2020, and the date 9/27 hints at the last verse of the 9th chapter of the prophetic book of Daniel that regards the end of the age and the end times period of the Antichrist. Nick Markakis is of Greek ancestry, and he played for Greece's national baseball team in the 2004 Olympics that were held in Athens, Greece. Nick Markakis played Major League Baseball for 15 years, and the 15th triangular number is the number 120, which is a number that symbolizes the church, as the church age began on Pentecost with 120 disciples. The name Nick hints at the Nicolaitan doctrine of the Evangelical Church, which is Reformed theology that is taught to pastors who study in the seminaries in Dallas. This heretical doctrine that is rooted in Gnosticism leads to the doctrine of once saved, always saved, and the myth of imputed righteousness as understood by evangelicals. In the book of Revelation, Jesus said that he hates the Nicolaitan doctrine and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. The word Nicolaitan is derived from two Greek words that mean ruling over the laity. Jesus forbade calling or following anyone as an authority other than him, yet quote-unquote pastors or priests or reverends claim to have authority over their equal brothers and sisters. And Jesus also strictly forbade preaching the Bible for money, which pastors and priests and people that give their money to pastors and priests disobey. Make sure you watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. The book of Revelation says that those who take the mark of the Antichrist will go to hell. Yet the Bible does not say that someone cannot beg for mercy from God and be forgiven if they have already taken it. The mark of the Antichrist is the thing. The purpose of the prediction that is from God that is being made in this video, for example, that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, is to prove this to you and to end the controversy and debate. The thing is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form, and it does not need an additional technology to go with it, nor some sort of false religious worship, nor the beginning of some sort of new supposed dispensation after the rapture. Dispensationalism is rooted in the heretical Reformed theology and Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates. Nick Markakis was born on the date November 17th, 1117, which hints at the number 117, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. 1117 also hints at the Antichrist, who is described in the book of Zechariah 11:17. 11:17 also hints at the first instance of the word owl in the Bible in Leviticus 11:17, and Barack Obama is known for being a night owl, and this was in contrast with his predecessor George Bush, who was known for being an early bird. The date 1117 also hints at H1117 in Strong's Concordance, which is the word Bama, which hints at Obama. Nick Markakis was born exactly 444 months before the 44th president finally released his long-anticipated autobiography book, A Promised Land. When the Israelites took possession of the Promised Land at the city of Jericho, they demonstrated a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls of security 7 times while 7 priests blew 7 trumpets. It is 444 months from Markakis's birth on 1117 to Obama's A Promised Land book on the date 1117, and 444 months is the equivalent of exactly 37 years, and the number 37 hints at 3 sets of 7. It was Joshua who led the Israelites into the Promised Land, and Joshua died at the age of 110. The record-scoring game by Dallas in 2007, which Nick Markakis played in, was 110 years after the last time a team scored 30 runs in a game. In the 2007 game, Nick Markakis played for the Baltimore Orioles. Orioles is a type of bird. It is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike on October 17, 2023, exactly 35 months after Obama released his A Promised Land book. It was the 35th president, President John Kennedy, who also died while serving in the White House. Markakis was selected in the 35th round of the college draft. Markakis chose not to sign with the Major League Baseball team and instead play for a college named Young Harris, which hints at Kamala Harris's predicted plane crash due to a bird strike 35 months after the release of Obama's book. And the following year, Markakis was selected in the 23rd round of the draft. He again chose to play another year with Young Harris College. 23 is the number that the basketball president wore when he played high school basketball, and 2023 is the year of Harris's predicted plane crash due to a bird strike, and the predicted year that the basketball president will become the president again. In the record-scoring game, when the Atlanta Braves scored 29 runs, on the same day that the other team that Hank Aaron played for scored 19 runs, on the date 9-9, in which played Nick Markakis. There was player number 23 who hit a record 9 runs batted in. God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together in his signs to confirm the signs and connections, and also because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, and the mark of the Antichrist changes one's 23 pairs of chromosomes. Player number 23 batted in 9 runs, also because the Antichrist is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school and became the president in 2009 and will become the president again in 2023. The home run king died 6 + 6 + 6 days after he took the thing on the first day of the 117th Congress. 117 is 9 times 13. From the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment, and the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist. The home run king, player number 44, died 6 + 6 + 6 days after he took the thing on the first day of the 117th Congress, and 117 is 9 times 13, and player 44 died from taking the thing 9 months and 13 days before the date 11/4, which hints at 11 times 4 equals 44, the day of Joe Biden's mandate on November 4th, 2021, for government workers to take the thing, which was exactly 99 years after the discovery of King Tut's tomb in the Valley of Kings. And in the Bible, the king of Egypt is Antichrist symbolism, and this mandate was exactly 13 years after the Antichrist king was first elected on November 4th, 2008. The home run king, player number 44 for Atlanta, died in Atlanta after having publicly taken the thing in Atlanta for publicity for the thing at the request of the CDC that is headquartered in Atlanta, and he died 6 + 6 + 6 days after he took the thing on the first day of the 117th Congress, and he died 9 months and 11 days, which hinted at the 9/11 warning of judgment, on 9/11 in 2001, before the Atlanta Braves won the 117th World Series. The prophetic last out of the game was made by the player named Freeman, player number 5, and this was on the same day that the FDA, along with the CDC in Atlanta, approved the thing for 5-year-olds. The middle chapter of the Bible is the 117th chapter of the book of Psalms, and the 2017 solar eclipse peaked over the middle of the country at 1:17 p.m. The path of totality of this eclipse also first entered the nation when it passed over Salem, the capital city of Oregon, at 10:17 a.m. In Hebrew, the word Salem means peace, and the number 7 is God's signature number. The path of the eclipse first entered the nation on the west coast in the 33rd state to join the Union, and then passed over 7 cities in America named Salem before it exited the nation on the east coast on the 33rd parallel. Jesus is our peace, and this is because he died and was resurrected at the age of 33. The eclipse entered the nation at 10:17 a.m. and then passed over St. Louis and peaked over the middle of the country at 1:17 p.m. This is why Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash in St. Louis on the date 10/17. Her predicted crash in the middle of the country and her death on the date 10/17 will point to the eclipse that entered the country at 10:17 a.m. and peaked at 1:17 p.m. over the middle of the country. As a result of her death, the Antichrist will rise to the president's office and will enforce the mark of the Antichrist that is symbolized by an X and the number 117, which is why Harris's plane crash and death will point to the X over the nation that will be engendered when the 2024 eclipse's path will cross over the path of the first eclipse that peaked over the middle of the country at 1:17 p.m. Cross over the path of the first eclipse that peaked over the middle of the country at 1:17 p.m. God pairs 9 and 13 together because 9 symbolizes the judgment and 13 from the Bible symbolizes the Antichrist. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 2 13th days of the month. And the 2 Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. All right. And also, 9 times 13 is very important. And I'll just take a couple of minutes to explain this. It symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. Again, the eclipse that will engender an X over America peaked over the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, and the peak began at 1:17 p.m. in St. Louis, which is where it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. And so the peak over the country began at 1:17 p.m., and the path of totality of that eclipse passed over St. Louis. It first entered the country on the west coast and was over the capital city of Salem at 10:17 a.m., and Kamala Harris is predicted to die on the date 10/17, October 17th, in St. Louis. In other words, this eclipse is symbolized by the number 117 because it peaked. It's all about its peak, and that's where the other eclipse will cross over it, where it peaked. It's all about where it peaked, and it peaked at 1:17 p.m. in St. Louis. But also, that eclipse was the new moon of the completion of the 1170th Brown's lunation. So there's what is called Brown's lunations. This astronomer named Brown in the early 20th century devised this numeric system by numbering lunations. So full moons or new moons have numbers. They begin on the new moon, okay? And they have numbers, and God has used this. 1170 hints at 117. And so this new moon that produced the solar eclipse that peaked at 1:17 p.m. was the completion of the 1170th lunation. This solar eclipse, this full moon, was in Leo, by the way, the King constellation. So 1170 also happens to be 3 times 390. It is 390 plus 390 plus 390. And this is extremely prophetic. In God's signs and in the Bible, God will repeat a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The number 390 is a period of time, 390 days, in a very important prophecy in the book of Ezekiel. But also, the 390th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word return. It is used by the Apostle James when he quoted Amos 9:11 from the Old Testament regarding the return of the Lord to rebuild his temple in Jerusalem, which is why Israel has been restored, so that Jesus can, when he returns, dwell in the temple in Jerusalem, which will be the capital of the world, and people will make pilgrimages to Jerusalem to see the Lord. And that's why this eclipse, that was that was the completion of 1,170 lunations, is most profound, because it hints at the return of Lord Jesus Christ. And of course, this eclipse was the big judgment warning for America. Okay, so there's, I'll just give you one thing. There's so much to say about that eclipse, and I explain it in the must-watch 5th episode of the first video series I ever made. And believe me, you need to watch it, look for it, search for it. Most astounding information ever. But I'll give you one thing that isn't in there. The date of the eclipse was exactly 5 + 5 days after the flooding on Washington's Mount Vernon estate due to 5.5 inches of rain in 1 hour. And that caused a landslide that collapsed the wall, the retaining wall on the bank of the river of his estate that he had built, Washington had built when he was living there. And the Washington Monument just happens to be 555 feet tall and 55.5 feet wide at its base. And it was 5.5 inches of rain. And that was August 11th, 2017, 5 + 5 days before the eclipse. But August 11th, 2017 was exactly 191 months after 9/11. And God uses the number 191 in other instances as well as symbolism for 9/11. And on 9/11, 2 planes struck the towers that were 110 stories high, and 110 divided by 2 equals 55, which hints at the 5.5 inches of rain. And so that in itself, that connection that I just explained, makes the eclipse a massive judgment warning sign in the league of 9/11, if you will. But this particular eclipse was a symbolic beginning of the last 7 years. So there are many people that know about how the end times are supposed to be 7 years. But we are already inside that 7 years. And the eclipse was one of the symbolic beginnings of the 7 years. The next eclipse that will cross over that eclipse that will engender the X will be in 2024, 7 years later. Oh, and furthermore, the midpoint of that eclipse was the first day of the thing. The thing was administered for the first time to the first American on December 14th, 2020. And that's the midpoint. And X's are all about the midpoint. And as is the X that will be engendered over the eclipse, where it peaked the first one. It'll engender an X. But X's are about the midpoint of the X. And the midpoint date of the 2 eclipses was the date of the thing, which is more confirmation that the thing is the X, which is the mark of the Antichrist, as described. Again, Ezekiel, the X is the mark of the Antichrist. And so yes, the X over America is more confirmation that is symbolic of chromosomes, which is what the mark of the Antichrist, the thing, changes. Furthermore, a chromosome is made of 2 arms, and the small of the 2 arms is called the petite arm. It's called P in scientific medicine. It's called the P arm, which stands for petite, which is small in French. And this is why exactly 70 weeks, which is hinting at the most central prophecy in the Bible, the 70 weeks prophecy, regarding the timing of the Lord in his first coming and also the end times period of the Antichrist. Philip Petit made his famous walk across the Twin Towers exactly 70 weeks after they officially opened on the prophetic 4/4 date, which hints at the 44th president. But anyway, not to get off onto a rabbit trail too much, Philip Petit with his walk across a tightrope while holding a balancing pole engenders an X with a man at the center, which hints at the cross and Jesus, and Christ as part of his arrival is part of the 70 weeks prophecy. And this was at the time of the opening, the beginning, the symbolic beginning of the Twin Towers. And when they collapsed, there was the miraculous 20-foot steel beam in the perfect proportion of a cross that was standing upright in the debris field after 9/11. That cross is now in the 9/11 museum. And incidentally, that cross is a part of how I came to faith. Well, anyway, that's his name, Petit, is more confirmation that the two towers are symbolic of the two arms of a chromosome. This is why the two towers were replaced with the one world tower that looks like a giant thing, the thing that is used to administer the thing. So back to what I was saying about Brown's lunations, is that this eclipse, which is the big judgment warning of the return of Lord Jesus Christ. That's why it was at the end of the 1170th lunation. Because, again, it hints at three sets of 390, which is the number that is symbolic of the Lord's return. And this isn't the only example in his signs. I'll give you another example to confirm that. There was the Flight 33, which was an Airbus 330, Hawaiian Airlines, that returned 3 times to LAX Airport. I should say LAX Airport. It returned 3 times for 3 separate mechanical issues. And it was Flight 33. But it was in the air for a total of 6.5 hours, which is 390 minutes. And so it returned 3 times, Flight 33, for 3 separate mechanical issues after being in the air for 390 minutes. The Hawaiian Airlines names its planes after stars in the sky, and this was named after the star Sirius, but with its Polynesian name. And that star in ancient Hebrew astrology is this king star, the coming prince star, the coming ruler star. That's the Messiah star. And just a few days later, that star was occulted by an asteroid and on, which is part of a trail of signs that's leading to the predicted date that an asteroid will hit Earth, which will be May 26th, 2024, the same day of the resurrection rapture. Okay, so that's just one example of the return symbolism for, and by the way, that Flight 33 was because it was 33 years after the NASA disaster of the Challenger disaster. Flight 33's return 3 times was on the 33rd anniversary of the Challenger disaster. Okay, and that was 17 years exactly before the Columbia Space Shuttle disaster. They're just a couple days apart, but they are commemorated on the same day every year because of them being so close. Just a couple of days. I think it's January 29th and February 1st or something like that. But it's 17 years. And the reason for that, the reason why 17 years in between the 2 shuttle disasters is because in between the 2 flights on 9/11 that crashed into the 2 towers, it was 17 minutes. And that is because it all points to Apollo 17, which was the last time that an American was on the moon. And the moon symbolizes Christ. And so the departure from the moon symbolizes America's departure from Christ, which is why Trump trumpeted the return to the moon in 2024. It was a trumpeting of how the Lord will return in 2024. Because the moon is a rock, and I think I explained it before, actually. Yeah. So anyway, and the last person on the moon was exactly 140, the last American on the moon was exactly 144 weeks after the first state, the state that Obama is from, legalized abortion. Okay. So, anyway, so back to the Browns lunation again. I'm explaining 117, actually. I'm still doing that, actually. Okay. Now, So the eclipse again peaked at 117. It was the end of the 1170th lunation. But the second coming, the return of Lord Jesus Christ, will be during the 1260th lunation. And those that know Bible prophecy, probably your jaws have dropped right now. The Day of Atonement, the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, will be during the 1260th lunation, the Day of Atonement on October 12th, 2024, which will be the day of the second coming. And the prediction being made in this video will prove this. And that is the purpose of this prediction. That is the date of the second coming. Case closed. Now you know. And for those that thought that they understood Matthew 24:36 properly, no one knows the day. It's a mistranslation and a misinterpretation to interpret that. It contradicts many other passages, furthermore, that says that we can know the day. The reason why 1260 is profound beyond words is because the number 1260 is mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy in the Old and New Testament regarding the end of the age, regarding the return of Lord Jesus Christ, regarding the period of the end time. And so what I am saying here, in summary, is the most amazing thing. The reason why Kamala Harris's plane will crash in St. Louis is that it will point to the eclipse that peaked over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. And it peaked at 1:17 p.m. in order to point to the completion of the 1170th Browns lunation. And as I just explained, that hints at the Lord's return. The Lord revealed that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis during the 160th Browns lunation. In other words, when Kamala Harris's plane crashes as predicted in St. Louis, it will be a massive sign pointing to the Lord's return. And one more thought, since I just thought of it, that is also why the eclipse was in the constellation Leo. Because in Bible prophecy, the Messiah comes from the tribe of Judah, which is symbolized by the constellation Leo, the king constellation. It is all pointing to the return of the King of Kings. But, so anyway, I'll just say that I've explained it enough, because I've explained it in other videos, that how 117 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist and why that's relevant. But the eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. and it was the 1170th lunation. It is a 117 number, and the eclipse is all about the X, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, as I explained. Another main reason why the number 117 is so very important and prophetic in God's signs, and it shouldn't have been left theoretically until the end of the video. It theoretically should have been mentioned at the beginning of the video, but nonetheless, all of the reasons that I have given so far are important as well. But what I'm saying is that this shouldn't be considered to be least important. But the number 117 hints at Genesis 7:11. And God has confirmed this through his signs. The date, for example, that Kamala Harris will crash, 10/17, hints at 117. And anyway, the point is that the numbers are symbolism, and these numbers are interchangeable. 11 and 7, which is 117, is also a hint at Genesis 7:11, which is the verse in which the flood judgment began. Also, I think I might have forgotten to mention it in this video, but Kamala Harris's flight path will be a parallel with Flight 77 on 9/11, which was a flight from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles before it was hijacked and then driven into the Pentagon. But Flight 77 hints at 11 times 17. And so that's also why she will die in a plane crash in St. Louis, where the eclipse peaked at 1:17 p.m. at the completion of the 1170th lunation. Flight 77 hints at 11 times 7, and that hints at 117. However, Flight 77 also hints at 7 times 11, which hints at Genesis 7:11. Also, the number 117 hints at the day of Jesus' resurrection, which was the 17th day of the first month, 117. Another major reason for the date 1017, for example. There is so much to this. What I'm going to do is leave a link in the description box below to a video made by another brother explaining and elaborating a whole lot more on the significance of the number 117 related to this theme of resurrection and rapture in the Bible. But in this context, as was explained in this video, of the number 117 being related to judgment and the mark of the Antichrist, it does make sense that we also have this other side of this meaning, which is the rescue of God's faithful from this severe persecution, which is why we have, or why it is, the number 117 is symbolic of the resurrection and rapture. All right, much more insight regarding the number 117 has come to light, and it means divide. It is symbolism for divide. Just for example, this is the reason why the peak of the Roman Empire was in 117 AD. It was it signified the division between the expansion and then the contraction of the Roman Empire. This is also why the middle chapter of the Bible is Psalms 117. It divides the Bible. The phrase, "let it divide," which occurs in Genesis chapter 1, in Hebrew gematria equals 117. And Jesus' resurrection on the date 117 is a division. He is the first fruits and the beginning of the separation of the sheep from the goats. Those that will be left behind, for example, in the rapture, versus those that will go in the rapture. This is the prophetic symbolism in the number 117. This is why the eclipse peaked in the middle of the country over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. And the eclipse path furthermore divided the country, and the upcoming eclipse, which will cross over the first path of the first eclipse, will divide that first eclipse and further divide the country. So the number 117 is symbolism for division, separation between the chaff and the wheat, the sheep and the goats. This is, in fact, the overarching plan of God's. This life is to determine a separation between those that will go to the kingdom and those that will not. Okay, and so anyway, there you have more insight on the significance of the number 117. It is beautiful, it is amazing, and very important in God's signs. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.